Bunnie Xo has never been the quiet type. As the host of the Dumb Blonde podcast, she has spent years pulling honest, uncomfortable stories out of other people. But in 2026, after nearly a decade married to country superstar Jelly Roll, she found herself telling her own story instead, and the version she's told, piece by piece, across podcasts, a memoir, and her divorce announcement, looks nothing like the polished highlight reel fans thought they knew. This is that story, built entirely from what Bunnie and Jelly Roll have actually said, in their own words, over the years. Long before anyone knew the name Jelly Roll, Elisa DeFord, the world knows her as Bunnie Xo, was already surviving on her own terms. She has spoken openly about a difficult, unstable childhood, and about leaving home at just 14 years old. From there, she worked her way through the adult entertainment industry, first as a dancer and later as a high-end escort, a chapter of her life she has never hidden or been ashamed of. It's a part of her story she later wrote about candidly in her memoir, Stripped Down, Unfiltered and Unapologetic. That same bluntness is what eventually built her second career. In 2019, she launched Dumb Blonde, a podcast built on the idea that most interviews are too polite to matter. Guests didn't get softball questions from Bunnie, they got pulled into the messy, human parts of their own stories. It worked. The show became one of the most listened-to podcasts hosted by a woman in the country, and it gave Bunnie a platform entirely separate from her husband's fame. But the biggest story she ever told didn't come from a guest chair. It came from her own marriage. In August 2015, Bunnie was at the Las Vegas Country Saloon on Fremont Street when a then-unknown Nashville rapper-turned-country artist named Jason DeFord, known on stage as Jelly Roll, opened for the duo Moonshine Bandits. By his own account years later, he wasn't performing to a packed house. He was playing to a room of about 20 people, with nowhere to sleep that night but a beat-up 1996 conversion van. Bunnie has said in her memoir that the moment they shook hands felt strangely enormous, like recognizing someone she'd never actually met. He wasn't her usual type, she's admitted more than once. She'd always gone for tough guy or emo, eyeliner-wearing men, and he leaned country boy through and through. Still, something about him stuck. She spent the rest of that night recording videos of him on her phone, later saying she had a feeling, even then, that he was going to be a star. At the time, though, neither of them was free to act on it. Bunnie was in a relationship she since described as unhealthy, and Jelly Roll, who had already served time in his early 20s on drug and robbery charges before turning to music, was focused on his own survival. So they went their separate ways. 2 months later, in October 2015, life reshuffled the pieces. Bunnie's boyfriend was headed to prison, and she found herself thinking about the sweet, southern boy from the saloon. She had a friend pass her number to Jelly Roll. He called. And according to Bunnie, months of late-night phone calls followed, including, by her own admission, conversations she'd taken in another room while an entirely different man was in her bed. It wasn't until Jelly Roll came back to Las Vegas for a video shoot that things turned physical, and even then, Bunnie has said, he surprised her. Rather than jumping into bed together that first night, he wanted to know about her 5-year plan. That question, what do you actually want out of life, became the axis their entire relationship would turn on. What happened next moved fast even by their own admission. By Bunnie's account on the podcast Busts In with the Boys, they were married about a month after reconnecting. On August 30th, 2016, they exchanged vows at a stained-glass wedding chapel in Las Vegas. A small, unplanned ceremony with no guest list, no dress, and no family in attendance. What fans didn't fully register until years later was the timeline surrounding that wedding. 1 week before they married, Jelly Roll welcomed a son, Noah, with another woman, a complication that would have derailed most new relationships entirely. Bunnie didn't walk away. She's since said she also gave Jelly Roll advice and support as he fought for custody of his daughter Bailee during that same turbulent period, meaning Bunnie stepped into a stepmother role almost from day one, well before she and Jelly Roll had even built a stable life together. There was no honeymoon phase in the traditional sense. Bunnie has described setting a 5-year plan with Jelly Roll that night in the chapel, a real, itemized list of goals they'd chase together, right down to eventually buying a house. By her own telling, they finished it. For years, the public narrative around Bunnie and Jelly Roll was almost aggressively wholesome. The woman who believed in a broke musician before anyone else did, sticking by him all the way to arenas and awards shows. What that narrative left out, until Bunnie addressed it directly, was how close the marriage came to ending in its first 2 years. Moving from Las Vegas to Tennessee was harder on Bunnie than she let on publicly at the time. She said she struggled with full-time parenting, especially given her own strained relationship with a stepmother growing up, and found herself homesick and romanticizing her old life. She's also described women from Jelly Roll's past making her early days in Nashville miserable. The tension came to a head not long after Bailee's tonsil surgery, when Bunnie packed a bag and left. Then, in 2018, came the moment Jelly Roll himself has only recently spoken about publicly. On the Human School podcast in October 2025, he admitted to having an affair on Bunnie, something he called one of the worst moments of his adult life. He said it was the first time he truly understood he could lose the relationship, despite knowing he was in love with her. The two separated that year. But instead of that being the end of the story, it became the hinge point. Bunnie has said it was her who went back to Las Vegas to get Jelly Roll back later in 2018, and the two did what he's since called a lot of work to repair the relationship. Neither of them has framed the affair as a secret they're proud of, but both have said the rebuilding that followed made the marriage stronger than it had ever been before. It's a detail that complicates the easy fairy tale version fans built around them. The marriage that looked unbreakable from the outside had, in fact, already broken once, quietly, years before anyone knew to ask. By 2020, Jelly Roll's music career finally caught fire. Hits like Save Me, Son of a Sinner, and Need a Favor turned a man who once played to 20 people in a Vegas bar into one of the biggest names in country music. Bunnie was there for every step of it, literally investing money she'd earned before leaving the sex work industry into funding his 2017 album Addiction Kills, long before there was any guarantee it would pay off. As his career rose, so did hers. Leaving sex work behind in 2019, Bunnie built Dumb Blonde into a genuine media brand, and by their joint red carpet debut at the 2022 CMA Awards, the two had become one of country music's most visible couples, not because either of them chased that visibility, but because their honesty about everything from their sex life to their financial struggles made them relatable in a way few celebrity couples manage. In 2023, on their 7th anniversary, they returned to the same small Las Vegas chapel where they'd married and renewed their vows, this time with Bunnie in the wedding dress she never got the first time around. Jelly Roll wrote publicly that his only regret from their original wedding was never seeing her in a dress, and that he intended to spend the rest of his life giving her the future he once promised her in that same chapel, back when neither of them had anything. At the 2026 Grammy Awards, accepting the award for Best Contemporary Country Album, Jelly Roll thanked Bunnie directly from the stage, crediting her with changing the entire direction of his life, telling the room he might have ended up dead or in prison without her. To the outside world, it looked like the story had reached its happy ending. What almost no one knew, while Jelly Roll's career kept climbing, was what the couple was privately going through at home. Over roughly 2 years, Bunnie and Jelly Roll pursued IVF in hopes of expanding their family, a process Bunnie has since described in painful detail, including the loss of 4 embryos. She said that kind of prolonged grief takes a toll on a relationship, and it's clear from her own account that it did. Alongside the fertility struggles, Bunnie has said she began noticing something more fundamental, a gap in how she and Jelly Roll were built as people. She's described herself as naturally reserved behind the scenes, in contrast to Jelly Roll, whom she called the complete opposite. Over time, she said, the two simply stopped communicating the way they used to. None of this was visible in the version of the relationship fans were watching, the anniversary posts, the award show speeches, the couple who seemed to have survived everything already. That's precisely the point Bunnie later tried to make. The public image and the private reality had quietly split apart, and only she was watching both sides. In May 2026, just 9 days before what Jelly Roll would later list as their official date of separation, the couple was still publicly celebrating, attending their daughter Bailee's senior prom together, with Bunnie posting a video captioned about never believing in happily ever after until she met him. Then, on May 18th, Jelly Roll filed for divorce in Williamson County, Tennessee, citing irreconcilable differences. He skipped the ACM Awards that same month without explanation, a year after walking that same red carpet with Bunnie by his side. The filing didn't become public for almost a month, until TMZ reported it on June 15, by which point Bunnie had already posted a TikTok lip-syncing Nickelback's "How You Remind Me," captioned simply that she was getting her sparkle back. By her own account on Dumb Blonde, the breakup wasn't as mutual as some assumed. Bunnie has said that during an argument on Mother's Day, she told Jelly Roll, in anger and frustration, to file the divorce papers. He did. She's since said she doesn't consider herself blindsided, exactly, but she's also been clear the split wasn't something she orchestrated. What she has said is that the argument became a genuine wake-up call, forcing conversations about their marriage that the two of them had been avoiding for a long time. What followed surprised a lot of people who expected a messy, public split. Within roughly 2 to 3 weeks, Bunnie confirmed on her podcast the two had already settled their divorce, including Jelly Roll agreeing to give her the 3-house compound the couple had purchased and that Bunnie had spent months personally designing. She's described the settlement in almost tender terms, saying he understood how much that property meant to her. Both of them have consistently denied rumors of infidelity driving the split, and both have gone out of their way to speak about each other with warmth rather than resentment. In a joint appearance on Jelly Roll's YouTube series shortly after the news broke, he called in Bunnie by phone rather than detail the breakup himself, deferring to her podcast for the full scoop. A small moment that said a lot about how they were choosing to handle the end of their marriage, together on their own terms, rather than through tabloid speculation. The person the divorce affected most outside of Bunnie and Jelly Roll themselves was his daughter, Bailee, who turned 18 around the time the divorce became public. Bunnie has spoken about the emotional weight Bailee carried during this period, old enough to understand exactly what was happening, but still in the middle of her own major life transition, having just celebrated her senior prom days before her parents' marriage effectively ended. Bunnie has been protective of Bailee throughout, pushing back publicly against online criticism directed at the family and making clear that whatever changed between her and Jelly Roll, her relationship with her stepdaughter wasn't up for negotiation. It's a detail that says something the divorce settlement doesn't. For Bunnie, the marriage and the family were never quite the same thing, and only one of them ended in May 2026. Taken together, what Bunnie Xo has revealed over the years, in her memoir, on other people's podcasts, and finally on her own show as her marriage ended, paints a much messier, much more human picture than the fairy tale fans thought they understood. A broke musician in a van. A woman surviving in an industry she didn't romanticize. An affair, a breakup, and a choice to rebuild rather than walk away. Years of quiet grief over IVF losses the public never saw. And finally, an ending that came fast, felt sudden to fans, but had clearly been building for a long time behind closed doors. Jelly Roll is, and will likely remain, one of the biggest stories in modern country music. But the woman who watched him build that story from a van in a Las Vegas parking lot to a Grammy stage has made one thing clear. The man the world sees on stage was never the whole story. He was always a work in progress, flawed, evolving, and deeply human, and for almost 10 years, Bunnie Xo was the only person who got to watch all of it, not just the highlight reel. Sources: Bunnie Xo, stripped down, unfiltered and unapologetic, memoir, busts in with the Boys podcast, Dumb Blonde podcast, Human School podcast, Jelly Roll, October 2025, The Howard Stern Show, June 2024, court filings, Williamson County, Tennessee, reporting from Rolling Stone, E! News, and Country Tang Daily, 2026. What do you think? Could this relationship have survived, or was this always where it was headed? Let us know in the comments.